There's no sign of the warrior Zhao. Brutus. The signal, remember the signal?
Signal?
Kill him!
So we are talking about the movie Warrior's Gate, a 2016 fantasy movie directed by Matthias Hone. Now this one basically reminds me of a few films that I've seen from years past. First and foremost, The Last Starfighter. This film is basically a fantasy version of The Last Starfighter, but it also has elements of the Martin Lawrence movie The Black Knight, and also those old kind of like Charles Band, Roger Corman kind of sword and sorcery films that he used to get in the 80s, Deathstalker, Wizards of the Lost Kingdom, things like that basically. Now the story here basically is we have this young American kid, and he happens to work in this kind of this shop which has got this kindly Chinese guy who gives him this big cauldron for no apparent reason, and he happens to be fantastic at this particular kind of like combat video game, and because of that reason only, he's basically transported to a kind of a magical kingdom. He's basically picked because he's good at this kind of video game to become the protector of this kind of other dimension that is accessible through this kind of this cauldron basically. But before that, he's basically put in charge of this kind of like this beautiful princess, and he's introducing her to our world and all of that, and then they get sucked into the kind of the other dimension where he meets this kind of warrior who is his kind of ally, and then they try and defeat the bad guys led by Bautista and his army. So that's pretty much your plot. It very much is like The Last Starfighter, but the way the movie plays out is a very unsophisticated style of storytelling. This is why it reminds me so much of the kind of the 80s sort of style sword and sorcery films, where it really was a very basic style of storytelling, kind of fun and kind of like very kind of swashbuckling, I guess, but not sophisticated. The weird thing about this film for me is it skews really young. The way the kind of the characters are depicted, they're all very kind of cartoonish, and the situations that happen seem very juvenile, and the way that people react to things and the dialogue, for example, is all extremely juvenile. So it kind of skews like a kids film, but there's actually quite a lot of killing in this film. It's not gory, but there was actually, you're not fighting robots or anything like that. You were fighting humans, all of who get skewered and chopped and things like that. So it's actually a fairly violent film, but obviously tried but I wouldn't really recommend this for kids, to be honest, even though it's the sensibilities of a kids in a certain degree. So bit of an odd film to kind of really recommend it to anyone, to be honest. I feel it's too young for the majority of adults and too old for kids. When we actually get into this kind of I guess you want to call it a fantasy realm, but it's more or less kind of medieval China. And the weird thing here is I feel it may infuriate some of the kind of social justice warrior types, because you basically have this kind of white American kid as the big hero trying to save this kind of Asian culture, all of whom speak English and stuff like that. So I can imagine it rubbing some people the wrong way, but it doesn't seem to have kind of really made much wave, because I guess no one's really talking about this film. But had this being a bigger film, then I can imagine it having some shit basically. Now, once we get into that kind of the fantasy world, I did have to say I kind of enjoyed the kind of the wire work and the kind of the action sequences, which I all thought were quite kind of fun and quite inventive. Some of them kind of, they overdo it a little bit, while we're kind of having this kind of quest to get to the princess and rescue her. There's a variety of challenges on the way, and I feel it could have maybe cut at least one or two of them out, because it makes the running time a little bit long, and you're just seeing one fight after another, one fight after another, one fight after another, and you don't really need to see so many fights keep happening, really, and it just kind of slows the story down a little bit. The one thing I really did like, I have to say, is Bautista in this role. Now, he basically plays this evil warlord, but he's actually got some quite funny lines here. He's very much, he's obviously found his niche with Drax, and there's quite a funny running gag actually between Bautista's character called Man King and his kind of lieutenant, where he's trying to make reference, oh, you should kill someone now, and the other guy doesn't get it, or he's doing it too much. It's quite funny. You'll know what I'm talking about if you see the movie. It's actually quite fun, and Dave Bautista obviously has quite a knack for comedy. But overall, I've got to say this film was an uneven tone, an odd mixture of different kind of like sensibilities and cultures. It kind of has the attitude of a kids' film, but the action sequences and the violence of more of an adult film. So I don't feel it really serves anyone in particular well, but you may kind of get a kick out of it. Overall, I'm going to give this movie a 4.5. I feel it should have been a little bit more focused and have a more particular audience in mind, I guess. Let me put it like this: if you like the more recent Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle films, you may like this. It's probably a little bit more violent than them, but overall, 4.5 for me. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.